It's better to be heard. So my interrogator here, who I envision a kind of mashup of Mike Wallace, Johnny Carson, and Hannibal Lecter, has curated the questions which came in from you all, and a couple of them came in late, which I may be able to address in the sermon discussion. We're not taking questions live here, but if you come to the sermon discussion, you can bring us some more if you like. And I have seen them, but I made a point of not preparing, so what you get is what you get. Al Ronyecz. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Al.
Thank you, Jonathan. Before we start, let me just say that for the questions that you cannot answer, you can phone a friend, or you can ask the audience, or do a 50-50 if you'd like. So our first question of the day is, what are 3 words that describe you best?
In 3 words. I'm curious, I'm reflective, and I like to think I'm wry. I would go heavy on the reflective. I was serious as a young church person, went to the youth group and all of that, and always asked the questions to my Sunday school teachers that they didn't want to hear, like, what about all those other religions, stuff that, and then later in life, when I could go to India and see it, I was asking the right questions and causing trouble. But my ex-wife used to say being married to me was like having to go to church every day of her life. So I got out of that.
Very good. Okay, next question. Is Live Oak a congregation or a church? What is your distinction of these terms as they relate to Live Oak?
The downtown Unitarian call themselves the Unitarian Society of Santa Barbara. I like a word that evokes a house of worship. So temple would be fine. Congregation is great. I like the congregation because it focuses on the people and not the building, although it's a really nice building. And I, unconsciously say church often. I was chatting with Ron Cronenberg the other day, said, see you at church. Well, Ron grew up Jewish. It doesn't make any sense to, I was looking for you, yeah, to say see you at church. But, the fancy word is temenos, which means, from which we get our word temple, which means sacred ground. I like to think of it as a holy place. I like that song.
Will the presence of artificial intelligence enhance or interfere with a minister's creativity in preparing a meaningful and spiritual sermon?
With Hal's encouragement, I have started using it. I tried a little bit last year, and I wasn't getting anything at all. But what it takes is good questions. You need to give it the right prompt. And if I'll ask several different times, I'll take the Phoenix topic last week. I asked for a spiritual talk on, and then I asked for a Jungian talk on, then I asked for a Unitarian sermon, and out of the 3, I got one idea. But if you keep asking, sooner or later, I'll tell you, in my other life teaching, I have never been fond of constructing tests, coming up with multiple choice. So I asked AI, and you have to ask sort of carefully and long kind of questions, and it generated 40 really thoughtful multiple choice questions, and I thought, this is going to help me. This is good, because it was a task I never liked doing. I think it'll help me on sermons in areas where I'm not particularly strong, but I only get little bits so far.
To what do you attribute your sense of humor? Does humor have a place in spirituality and worship?
There was a very interesting movement called the theology of play in the late 60s and early 70s. Harvey Cox, Sam Keen, a number of people. I knew some of the players and went to retreats on this topic. And then, like other fads, it sort of faded out. I think the idea is that in play, which includes humor, there's a little opening. They call them wise cracks. Maybe through the cracks some wisdom comes.
Describe one or two movies, books, or TV series that you found to be profoundly insightful or moving.
Got to be The Twilight Zone. That's it, which I've seen all of those at least a dozen times, and then they started several times. I've seen all of those at least once. And then there was something on, I think it was on Prime, it was called Electric Dreams. These were stories by Philip K. Dick, who is the strangest sci-fi writer, profound, who questions, how do we know things are real? Or for that matter, how do I know I am me? Which is really mind-twisting stuff. I love that stuff. My favorite movie of all time is probably Wings of Desire, which is about how sad angels get because they don't die.
When you need it, where do you turn for hope or relief in times of need or distress?
I don't get too distressed. I do get needy. I guess that's a form of distress. And I turn to Anne. I turn to my partner. And not only is she a deep soul, but she's a trained therapist, and sometimes I really need the help. I turn to my therapist and got a good one. And the thing is, the therapists get better and better, although the penultimate one was so-so. But the reason they get better is because it builds on the work you did before. So some people will say, oh, you're great. You know, that jerk I used to talk to didn't have anything. Well, you know, I got something even from the therapists that weren't so deep and profound. And I also turn to prayer in a way, although I'm not metaphysical. I don't think I'm praying to a personality out in the ether that's answering my prayers. I sort of think I'm praying to my own deeper wisdom or the collective wisdom of the ages or something like that. But I do find that in Bible college we called it doing our devotions, which was scripture and prayer. Now it's reading some spiritual book rather briefly, usually a few pages, and then a little journaling meditation time. And it helps. I get help.
Have you ever borne witness to what you would define as a miracle? Do you believe miracles happen?
I escaped the Jesus cult. That was pretty amazing. That is, and it was. I mean, there's a lot of good Christianity, but the part I was in was pretty negative. It was pretty harsh, and I visit with family members. I go occasionally to the Methodist church where they sing the hymns that were like the ones I sang as a kid and stuff. So it's kind of nice for nostalgia. And Anne's extended family is Catholic. On holiday time, I go to mass, and I like it. But I got out of something. And I mentioned that one because it's not a miracle. And besides, it's kind of funny to have a sort of anti-miracle as my example. But when I was in that worldview, I could not imagine that there was any place outside of it. So there was no way to get out of it because there wasn't anywhere out of it. But there is, and I got there with the help of a very good Christian therapist who I went to be strengthened in my faith. And I think it was the second session that he said, I think you have to deconstruct this whole religious thing you've got going. I don't think it's working for you. The last thing I expected, one of those real switches, which I did not imagine. So that kind of miracle, I would separate miracles into the kind that involve such radical shifts of perspective that there was no way to grasp it before. So the world changes if you go through that kind of thing, and I've had a couple of those. The other kind of miracle, I don't know. I think it's a miracle that a large group of Unitarians managed to put up with each other. I witness that every day.
Do you believe in free will?
I used to, but when you think back, when I think of my younger self and the decisions I made, and some of them are embarrassing, and I'm not going to list them, but I think, yeah, but how could I have thought anything different? I was so within a frame of reference. So that seriously limits how much wiggle room you have. That said, we do have a little, and we can gain a little more by inner work, and it is a treasure. But so it's a real yes and no answer, and frankly, it's a little more no than yes.
Can an atheist be a mystic?
I love that one. I really like that one. And absolutely, I would put myself close to that category. I don't like, it's a little hard. Somebody says, well, are you a believer? Are you an agnostic? Are you an atheist? I usually answer atheist, even though it's really wobbly because I'm a religious person. I mean, I pray sort of, kind of. And I have a religious job, and it matters to me, and it's always mattered to me. And yet, that's the short answer. The short answer, do I think there's a there? Do I think there's something in the creation of the universe that I can sort of have a conversation with? I don't think that. I do think there's a lot larger than I am, which is what a lot of people would call God. But see, I start getting into a lot of words because it gets really complicated, which I think it probably should be. It's pretty big questions. But about the mystical part, I think anybody can be a mystic. I think that's sort of opening up to the mystery. And the mystery is large and powerful. And, I've seen the light. I mean, I literally have seen lights. I mean, you've seen some things which are kind of visionary and things, and really treasure them. And I don't think the belief system has much to do with it. I think it's an experience, and the experiential level of spirituality is, to my mind, much more powerful and valuable and beautiful than the list of ideas. And I want to go toward that, and I encourage anybody to find ways to get to that, the mystical part.
Have you ever had an uncanny experience that really baffled you?
I have, and I'll tell you, but I want to tell you about a parlor game. I was at a really boring party one time, and it was not my party, it was not my house, but I mean, the host wasn't able to, and the pretzels weren't working. It was, and I said, let's play a parlor game. Let's all share uncanny experiences. I mean, if you haven't had one, you don't have to share, but let's go around. Everybody shared, and everybody else's were much better than mine. One had lived in a house and had come home and was fiddling with keys and could hear somebody talking sort of in the little entryway beyond the door, and opened the door, and nobody was in the house. Had roommates, had housemates, and none of them were there, and he could identify the voices. And I don't know if it was a few days or a couple weeks later, because I can't remember the story that well, but was sitting in a room, and those housemates were talking, and they had word for word the conversation he had heard through the door. I can't even remember if it was a guy. Mine was going to the Renaissance Fair by myself, as it happened, because some task I was doing was done early, and I was driving down past it when it used to be in the San Fernando Valley, and I thought, I got 3 hours here, I'm going to the fair. So I just pulled over and went in. And I had been before, but it had been a long time, and it's all Elizabethan England. And they're selling things, and all the people in the stalls and stuff are speaking in the antique language and everything like that. And they have jousting and all this. So it's sort of encouraging you to imagine you are in Elizabethan England. And I was a little tired, and I started imagining it, and I started believing it. I started thinking I was the Yankee in King Arthur's court, and that this was time somehow. I didn't go in, I mean, my mind wasn't working that well because I didn't figure out how this had happened or anything. And I was able to tune out the fact that people had cameras hanging on them and, Hawaiian shirts and stuff that you wouldn't have found. I was really there. I was really there, and I was there for a couple of hours. And then the thing was ending, and it was time to sort of walk out, and the cars weren't visible. You had to sort of go up over a rise slightly to the big parking area. And when I saw the cars, I woke out of it, and it scared me. It was really exciting when I was there because I really believed I was there. I mean, I just went a little crazy for an afternoon, and it's a cool thing. But mine wasn't as magical as the voices behind the door. I mean, these other people had some really good stories, and at several other parties I have sort of brought that out, and nobody ever got annoyed. And as far as I can remember, everybody had something.
I think we have maybe time for maybe 3 more. What are your thoughts on what happens after we die?
I don't think so, personally. And how do you know? How do we know? And people that have their case, I say, great, maybe, could be, or maybe if you believe that, you get that. I don't know. I worked a fair amount with people back in the day who were dying of AIDS, and I remember this rather poetic, very young, very handsome guy who was fading away and getting gone. And he said, "Please tell anybody who's going to be with me in the last moments not to start talking." He says, "Listen, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear any kind of good news or anything. I am going out into the velvety darkness, and that's it. Case closed. Show over." That's what I think. And I find comfort in that. And I liked his story, and I've sort of bought his story. That's what I think. And I think the case for God, the case for an afterlife, are just as intellectually legitimate as the case against. So take your pick. Can't prove any of them.
Give us your thoughts on the following: worship, prayer, spirituality, higher power.
Worship is beautiful, and I got involved with this before getting into this cool position that I'm in now. And the worship crew here is extraordinary. The amount of work that goes into it, you don't see. You don't. Picking the readings, picking the pictures, picking the songs, that's in addition to whatever thoughts are put together for a homily or a sermon. And I do believe in the power of ritual. Ceremonial magic is created by the ceremony, that in the doing we actually get some illumination, some transcendence, even though it's more or less a skeptic's version I have here. However, I come faithfully to have the experience, and it works. Worship works. What's the second one?
Prayer?
Prayer, I've said a little about that. I think prayer can be done across the board in terms of, and I like journaling. I like to, and I kind of write out sort of a prayer, and then it's kind of like pen pal, where then some, I think it's my own higher power or something, but I mean, we could get into the weeds of what it is, but using my hand, an answer comes. That's when I was writing with a pen. And then I was typing, and now I'm actually dictating into my phone. So it's me talking to me. But the things that the answer says are not things I already know. Ooh.
Spirituality?
You kind of answered that one.
All right. And higher power?
Yeah. In Jungian theory, there is something called the archetype of the self. The idea of a higher power in recovery language was drawn directly from Carl Jung's ideas in correspondence with Carl Jung. And those letters float around the internet. You can find them. This was something that preceded AA. It was called the Oxford movement. And a lot of the key ideas got brought into AA. I think there is something. Then we get into the debate about what that is. I tend to think it's, I said this already, my own deeper wisdom, and whatever tradition I picked up, whatever is left from the religion of my childhood after I remove a lot of the key pieces. There's still more left than some people have. I mean, some people are so saturated that, you know, you think you've emptied the house and it still smells of roses, you know, okay. So I think there is something worth meditating on, and that there is a reward in that. Notice that my emphasis is more on the experience than on the argument, because the arguments fall apart, at least for me.
And finally, before I quit, thank you very much for doing this, Jonathan. It was really quite enlightening. What is your assessment of where we are at Live Oak after a year of your ministry? If you had a magic wand, what would you change? Is there a gift we could give to ourselves in the coming year?
First of all, thank you everyone for not running screaming from the place when I became the minister. I am deeply grateful for that. I think we got back to the sweet spirit that we used to have that got lost for a little while. There is a warmth and a level of connection here. I've been always a part of a congregation, and that's many. And this is the level of warmth here is really tangible. And we have a lot of building to do, and I think what you do is you do church. That is, you do what you do it well, and good things happen. That's build it and they will come. That's my theory of things. So I don't, the anxiety like, oh, things are terrible, we have to fix something fast. We kind of got past that. I think that's a kind of panic stage, and I'm glad that it's not around so much, because we're okay. We are okay. We're still okay. Still okay. Magic wand. I didn't think of anything big. I think we go on loving ourselves. Sometimes in a committee meeting, you know, there'll be a little frustration over something, and I will say, we're not really here to be incredibly productive. I mean, we get